in a room that was neither large nor small, illuminated only by the softened morning light filtered through polyester curtains in a shade, best described as damp beige, there stood a cabinet. The cabinet, made of a dark wood that might once have been cherry, or perhaps just plywood stained to resemble it, had 4 drawers. But only one of these drawers, the third from the top, is the subject of our long and faithful inquiry tonight. This drawer, neglected since approximately March of 1983, though some say it could have been April, contains nothing particularly exciting. But it contains it in such a way that we must take time, slow, deliberate time, to truly appreciate it. The handle is brass, slightly tarnished. A patina, really. Not dramatic, not green like aged copper. No, this patina is more matte, a dull golden tone that speaks less of time and more of air. The air in this room, still, undisturbed, has gently caressed this drawer for over 40 years. The edges of the drawer are lined with a fine accumulation of dust. The kind of dust that tells a story, not of movement but of waiting. It clings to the corners as if loyal to its position, forming soft shadows beneath the afternoon sun that once, in the early 90s, struck the cabinet at a 47-degree angle for approximately 38 seconds each April 19th. Inside the drawer, though we won't fully open it just yet, rests a bundle of old envelopes. We'll get to those, but first, the wood grain. Imagine a slow-moving river. Now imagine that river is dry, and the current was just imagined, not real. That is the feeling one gets when observing the grain on this drawer front. The patterns are inconsistent, yet loyal to the general horizontal tendency of the wood. One line curves, then straightens. Another forks slightly, a rogue ripple in an otherwise monotonous current. The lacquer finish, aged and slightly cracked, captures just enough light to remind us that it once tried to shine, but no longer. We pause as the silence of the room presses in again. There is no ticking clock, only the memory of ticking. At this point, you may find yourself feeling the weight of the story. A drawer unopened, a room undisturbed, time unmoving. And yet it is here that we begin. Tomorrow, or in the next part, we may examine the envelopes, or the drawer lining, or the faint scent of aging glue from the corner seam. But not yet. For now, we simply sit beside the drawer, listening to its stillness. Beyond the wood grain and the patina of the handle, there is the subtle architecture of the drawer itself. The corners are joined with care, likely dovetail joints, though age has softened their sharpness. A master carpenter might see the craftsmanship. A casual observer would note only the faint lines where the wood meets. The drawer slides on wooden rails, worn smooth by countless openings long before it was left untouched. The rails, hidden from sight, whisper stories of use and neglect, of hands reaching for forgotten objects and hands withdrawing in disinterest. At the back inside wall of the drawer, faint scratches mar the surface. They are shallow, irregular, perhaps caused by the edge of an envelope or the tip of a pen long since lost. A small stain, almost imperceptible, hints at a spilled liquid, maybe tea or ink, that dried decades ago. The drawer's lining, once a bright white cotton fabric, is now faded and yellowed, soft to the touch and slightly frayed at the edges. This fabric muffles sound, so that the objects inside rest silently, without clatter or fuss. The room itself is quiet, save for the distant ticking of a clock somewhere beyond a closed door. That clock is not part of this story. Now and then, a faint draught stirs the edges of the curtains, causing the dust motes to swirl gently in the sunlight. It is a scene unchanged, patiently waiting for the next step, the next moment. And so we wait with it. The drawer, having remained closed and silent for decades, now sits open just enough to reveal its contents, or at least a glimpse of them. Nestled within the confines of its wooden frame is a small collection of envelopes, tied together with the fragile blue tape whose faded hue tells tales of years past. You look at the bundle closely. The paper, yellowed and brittle, speaks of age, as though the fibers themselves carry the burden of time. Some of the envelopes bear handwriting, carefully penned in a cursive style that has long fallen out of favor. The ink has faded unevenly, some letters darker, others barely visible. There are no stamps on these envelopes, or perhaps there once were. But time has robbed them of their color and texture, leaving only faint outlines and ghostly impressions. The tape holding them together seems almost ceremonial, as if its purpose is not merely to bind, but to protect these forgotten memories from the ravages of time and neglect. You reach out, fingers trembling slightly, and trace the edges of the envelopes, careful not to disturb their delicate arrangement. Inside you imagine are stories, stories never told, or told only in whispers and silence. Perhaps letters exchanged between people long since gone, or notes scribbled in haste but never sent. The drawer's lining, now soft and worn, cushions the envelopes like a gentle cradle. It absorbs the faint scent of old paper and glue, a scent both comforting and melancholy. On the bottom of the drawer, just beneath the bundle, a single paperclip lies forgotten, its metal dulled by years of stillness. It's bent slightly, as if it tried once to hold something together but failed. The weight of these objects is negligible in a physical sense, but immense in their silent testimony to time's passage. You sit quietly, pondering the contrast between the stillness inside the drawer and the relentless motion of the world outside. Outside the room, distant sounds filter through closed doors and windows, a clock ticking, footsteps on a wooden floor, the occasional creak of an old house settling. Inside, time seems to have been paused, suspended in a fragile balance between memory and oblivion. You lean closer, noticing the faint imprint of writing through one of the envelopes, a shadow of words just beneath the surface. The meaning remains elusive, hidden beneath layers of paper and dust. A tiny tear mars the edge of another envelope, a flaw that speaks not of neglect, but of fragile survival. The drawer, with its bundle of envelopes, becomes a microcosm of forgotten lives, quiet histories and unspoken thoughts. And yet, despite the silence, there is a gentle presence here, a whispered invitation to pause, to reflect, and ultimately to rest. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the slow rhythm of the quiet room wash over you. The drawer remains open a crack, as if willing to share more but content to wait. Tomorrow perhaps you will linger longer. Perhaps you will unfold a single envelope, revealing the secrets it holds, or simply rest in the comfort of its mystery. But for now you let the stillness settle, embracing the gentle embrace of time itself. You return to the drawer once again, not to disturb it, but to observe, to simply be near it. It is slightly ajar in exactly the same position you left it. This in itself is comforting, the quiet consistency of forgotten things. Your eyes are drawn downward to a small metallic glint near the corner. It is a paperclip, a single, slightly bent paperclip, the kind you might find in any office drawer, unremarkable in both shape and function. And yet, here under this light, in this stillness, it becomes something else. The metal is no longer silver, but softened to a dull gray, with tiny specks of oxidation, giving it the appearance of old stone. It lies on its side, touching the fabric lining. Its position appears casual, but you sense it has not moved in years. Perhaps it once held two sheets of paper together, perhaps one of the envelopes, or perhaps it was dropped accidentally and forgotten in an instant, only to wait patiently for someone to notice. You reach a hand toward it, but stop before contact. There is something sacred about its rest. Instead, your attention shifts to the lining of the drawer, the fabric that has silently witnessed it all. In the back corner, a small fold has formed, gathering dust like a shallow dune in a windless desert. The fabric's threads are barely visible, frayed in some places, gently curled at the edges. You notice a faint discoloration just beneath the paperclip, as though it has left an impression of its existence on the cloth. There are no markings, no stains, just a slow fading of color, subtle and patient. You lean in closer. The air is still, and there is no sound except the distant hum of silence. You imagine the moment when this lining was new, perhaps crisp and clean, tucked in with care. That moment is gone, but its echo remains. The corners of the drawer hold a quiet darkness, not ominous, but gentle, like the corners of a dream you don't remember. You sit quietly beside the drawer, breathing slowly. There is no need to rush. The drawer has waited for decades. It will wait again. Tomorrow maybe you will move the paperclip, or smooth the fold, or look at the bottom of the envelopes. But for now, the drawer is enough. Morning again, and the room receives you the same way it always does, with silence, and with dust floating in the dim light, like tired thoughts. The drawer remains in its slightly open state, unchanged. It has not moved, but something feels different. You lean closer, inspecting it not for dramatic change, but for the smallest deviation. And there it is. One envelope, the third one in the stack, has shifted slightly. No more than a few millimeters. Perhaps the draft from the window disturbed it, or the weight of time itself, gently nudging it in its endless downward pressure. The corner now sticks out at a modest angle, barely noticeable. But in a drawer like this, such movement feels monumental. You observe the exposed edge of the envelope's flap. The glue line is faint, a dull beige now, no longer sticky, its purpose long fulfilled. You do not open it, not yet, but you allow yourself to look closer. The paper is slightly warped, as if humidity once tried to alter its shape, but gave up halfway. A single faint pencil mark, possibly the number 4 or a poorly formed letter H, appears near the upper right. Is it a date, a name, a careless note scribbled by a distracted hand decades ago? The handwriting is tentative, unsure, like someone wrote it just to remember something briefly, then forgot anyway. Below the envelopes, the fabric lining shows a new fold, not formed by action, but perhaps by time settling in. You notice that the thread at one seam has started to fray, not in a dramatic unraveling, but in a slow, patient loosening. Your fingers hover just above the envelope's edge. The temptation to unfold it rises, but you refrain. The drawer is not a place of answers. It is a place of still questions. Instead, you notice the gentle creak of the wooden floor beneath you as you shift your weight. The room acknowledges your presence, not warmly, not coldly, but neutrally, like a space used to being unnoticed. You stay still for a long moment, watching the envelope that has barely moved. There is a kind of reverence in stillness, in not disturbing the fragile order of forgotten things. The paperclip remains where it was, silently keeping its place. The blue tape remains taut, if slightly faded. The dust has settled again. Everything is as it was, or perhaps just close enough. You breathe deeply and let your eyes rest on the drawer's opening. That sliver of space between wood and mystery. It is enough. Tomorrow you might touch the envelope, or you might not. For now, the slight shift is your entire story. Today you return not to open anything new, but to look deeper into what is already visible. The envelope from yesterday remains unchanged. It has not moved, not shifted, still nameless, still silent. Your gaze lowers slightly, following the edge of the envelope down to the lining beneath it. There, just visible where the envelope meets the fabric, is dust. Not a layer, but something softer, a fine gathering of time that has settled like mist. The dust does not cover everything equally. Some of it clings to the creases of the fabric, while other particles hover near the seams. You lean closer. The light coming through the window has changed since your last visit. It now enters at a sharper angle, tracing golden lines along the floor and reaching the edge of the drawer. The sunlight finds the dust and gives it a kind of shimmer, not bright, but warm, like old candlelight remembered rather than seen. You notice that the very bottom of the drawer is not entirely flat. There is a faint dip near the back, perhaps from age, perhaps from weight. The dust gathers most densely there, in that slight depression, as though the drawer is collecting time itself. Your fingers hover near it, not to wipe it away, but simply to acknowledge it. Dust, after all, is what remains when everything else has passed. You find something unexpected, a tiny corner of old paper just barely visible beneath the lining. Not a full sheet, just a torn corner, curled and yellowed, hiding under the fabric's edge. It may have once belonged to one of the envelopes, or it may have arrived there alone, fallen by accident, unnoticed and unimportant. You do not remove it. You do not even touch it. You simply observe its presence, small, insignificant and yet strangely grounding. The air is still. Outside the window a branch sways once, then returns to stillness. A soft thud echoes faintly through the house, perhaps from a door closing in another room. The drawer does not respond. It continues to exist, unchanged and undisturbed. You sit with it, not to uncover, not to rearrange, but to witness. The dust, the corner of paper, the fabric, the envelope, none of it calls for action. They simply are, and in their stillness you find your own. The drawer greets you again with its usual silence. This time you return not to study the dust, nor the paperclip, nor even the envelope, but something more elusive, something that is barely there. As the light shifts across the wooden interior, you notice something new, or perhaps it was always there, waiting for the right angle of light, the right mood of observation, a faint imprint, a shape pressed into the wood, nearly invisible unless you are very still. It is oval, perhaps 4 centimeters long and shallow, too shallow to be carved. It is not etched. It is merely impressed. You tilt your head slightly, letting the low sun draw soft shadows across the surface. The shape becomes clearer. It could be from a button or a key, or maybe it was simply a knot in the wood, smoothed by time and mistaken for something else. But you study it anyway. The drawer's interior grain moves around the impression, bending slightly like water around a pebble. You run a finger near, not over, the mark, feeling the subtle rise and fall of the wood, as if the surface is breathing very slowly. A memory stirs, faint and unrelated. Perhaps the sound of a door creaking in another house long ago, or the smell of cardboard after rain. The imprint holds no story, and yet your mind seeks one. Perhaps that is what time does. It places meaning where there was none. Beside the mark, there is a hairline crack in the wood, too thin to catch with a fingernail, but just visible. The crack is short, running no more than 2 centimeters before fading back into the grain. You imagine it formed slowly, year by year, as the drawer expanded and contracted with changes in season. It carries no drama, no urgency, just quiet evidence of the passage of time. The fabric lining near it has gathered in a gentle crease, curling slightly as though bowing to the imprint. You do not touch it. There is no need. You simply sit, breathing slowly, while the drawer offers no words, no memories, no resistance. The faint imprint, whether real or imagined, remains. And that is enough for today. The quiet room holds its breath as the soft breeze stirs the beige curtains once more. The gentle movement is slow and deliberate, almost hesitant, as if the fabric itself is reluctant to disturb the stillness. The curtain flutters, casting shifting shadows across the faded wooden floorboards. Dust motes dance lazily in the sunlight, tracing slow, meandering paths through the air. You listen closely, and amidst the silence, there is a subtle whisper, the rustle of fabric brushing against itself. A sound so faint it might be imagined. The drawer remains closed, resting quietly in its corner. But the room around it breathes with a delicate life. The breeze carries with it the faint scent of aged wood and distant rain, a fragrance mingling with the stale air of forgotten memories. You notice how the shadows move gently across the drawer's surface, the wood grain catching the light and dark in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The curtain's whisper seems to echo softly, blending with the hum of the house, the creak of floorboards, the distant ticking of a clock, the faint murmur of life beyond these walls. Time here feels suspended, not measured by minutes or hours, but by the slow dance of light and shadow, sound and silence. The room is a sanctuary of stillness, a place where even the smallest movement carries weight. You breathe in deeply, filling your lungs with the cool, quiet air. The drawer waits patiently, its secrets held close, while the curtain continues its gentle dance. And in this moment all is calm. The room is filled with a quiet rhythm, the steady ticking of an old clock. It is not loud, but persistent, marking time with calm regularity. The sound seems to seep into the walls, the floor, the very air around you, embedding itself into the fabric of the space like a slow heartbeat. Each tick and tock is a gentle reminder of the passing moments, Though here, time feels slowed, stretched out like taffy, pulled by unseen hands. The clock's face is hidden from view, but you imagine its hands moving slowly, deliberately, as if reluctant to advance too quickly. You listen carefully, feeling the ticking sync with your own breath. In, out, in, out. The drawer remains closed, but the sound reaches inside, filling the space between the wood and the envelopes, weaving its steady rhythm through the silence. The air carries the faint scent of aged wood, mingled with a subtle metallic tang, perhaps. The delicate scent of the clock's internal mechanism, quietly working behind the scenes. Dust motes swirl lazily in the shafts of light cutting through the window, moving gently to the metronome of the ticking. Outside, a distant bird calls softly, but the sound is muted, swallowed by the thick walls of the house, as if the world beyond this room is dimmed, hushed. You consider the clock's steady beat as a metronome for this quiet sanctuary, marking moments that seem both infinite and fleeting, present and distant. The silence between ticks is as significant as the ticks themselves, small pockets of calm amid the ongoing march of time. You find comfort in the predictability, the regularity of the sound, a simple certainty in an otherwise silent, forgotten space. The slow tick-tock becomes a lullaby for the room, a rhythmic pulse beneath the stillness. You breathe deeply, matching your breath to the clock's rhythm, feeling a gentle calm wash over you with each beat. The drawer, the envelopes, the dust all seem to pause in harmony with the ticking, as though held in a momentary suspension. Your gaze drifts to the faint shadows on the walls, shifting slowly in time with the ticking. You realize that in this room, time is both absent and ever-present, marked only by the unchanging cadence of the clock. And for a moment there is nothing else, only the steady pulse, the quiet and you. The room remains as it always is, quiet, patient, waiting. The wooden floorboards creak faintly under an unseen weight. Though there is no one there, dust motes continue their slow, aimless dance in the shafts of sunlight pouring through the beige curtains. The drawer, closed and steadfast, holds its secrets silently. You breathe in slowly, filling your lungs with the warm, slightly musty air. Time seems to have slowed here, not rushing forward but stretching into a long, gentle moment. The sounds of the outside world fade into a distant murmur, barely noticeable. In this room, the only movement is the slow drift of dust and the soft play of light and shadow. The stillness is complete yet not oppressive. Instead, it invites reflection, a space to rest, to pause, to simply be. You close your eyes briefly, letting the quiet wash over you. The room does not demand attention or action. It simply is. And in that simple being there is peace. Today, your gaze drifts away from the drawer. Not because it has lost its mystery, but because the quiet rhythm of the room draws your attention elsewhere. Your eyes settle on the wall beside the drawer, a simple, pale surface, aged gently by time and shadow. At first it seems unremarkable. A plain wall, painted in a color that once might have been ivory, or soft cream, or the lightest gray. But as you sit quietly, the wall begins to speak, not in words but in textures. The paint has thinned in certain places, revealing the faint pattern of brush strokes left by the person who applied it. Not uniform strokes. Some move horizontally, while others shift slightly upward, as though the painter's hand wavered in thought. There are areas where the paint is thicker, raised just enough to cast a soft shadow beneath itself when the light hits from the side. Near the top, a hairline crack runs downward for about 12 centimeters. It's not alarming, not structural. Just a quiet reminder that the wall, like the drawer, like the room, has aged with grace. The crack veers slightly to the left, as if it changed its mind midway, unsure of its final destination. Below the crack, a faint oval smudge appears, likely from a hand once placed there long ago. Not recently. The oils are long gone. What remains is only a slight difference in the sheen of the surface. Matt interrupted by memory. You imagine someone leaning against the wall, pausing, thinking, then stepping away. A single nail, protruding near the center, suggests that something once hung there. A photograph, a frame, a small clock, The nail is bent slightly downward, as though pulled by time rather than force. Around it, the wall is darker, not from dirt but from shadow, the kind of shadow that settles slowly year after year. Lower down, the baseboard curves slightly inward where the floor meets the wall. The wood of the baseboard has a tiny chip, no larger than a grain of rice, revealing a paler layer beneath. Perhaps someone's shoe once tapped it, or a vacuum cleaner bumped it. Nothing dramatic, nothing recent. Yet in this room, where nothing moves quickly, even the smallest chip feels significant. The wall does not speak loudly, but in its stillness, in its quiet imperfections, it mirrors the drawer, a surface upon which time has left its fingerprint. You sit quietly with it, breathing, observing, not needing to fix, not needing to understand. The drawer remains in the corner, silent, constant. The wall stands beside it, unchanged and unchanging. And in this silence, in this subtle conversation between objects and air, you find yourself deeply, almost imperceptibly, at rest. There is a place in the room where the light does not reach, not because it is dark, but because it is ignored. A small corner, between the drawer and the adjacent wall, low to the ground, partially obscured by shadow and stillness. You never meant to notice it, but now that you have, it draws you in with quiet insistence. The baseboard curves gently here, forming a shallow space where dust accumulates without resistance. The floor meets the wall at a barely imperfect angle, not sharp, but slightly softened, as though time has worn the edges smooth. You lean slightly, observing the still air that occupies that space. No movement, no wind, no sound, only a small patch of undisturbed stillness, where the dust seems denser, grayer, and older than the rest of the room. There is a small thread there, beige or grey, it's hard to tell. It could be from a sock, or a blanket, or the lining of a forgotten pocket. It lies curled like a question mark, soft, inert. You do not touch it. Instead, you observe its place in the room, unimportant, and yet completely at home. A single flake of paint rests nearby, likely fallen from the baseboard. It is curved, with one edge rough and uneven, the other smooth, as though time itself peeled it gently away. The light never finds this space directly. It remains cool, shaded, distant, but that distance is peaceful. The absence of light creates no fear, only quiet. The floor beneath appears slightly darker here, not stained, just aged. The grain of the wood softens into shadow, and the texture becomes less defined. You watch it with the attention given to forgotten corners, not out of curiosity, but out of presence. The drawer does not reach this space either. It ends just before it, as if respectfully leaving the corner untouched. The silence here is complete. No ticking, no breeze. Only the soft hum of a house at rest and the stillness of a corner unnoticed. You close your eyes and imagine resting there, small, curled like the thread, as still as the dust. The drawer remains behind you, the world further still, and the corner remains unchanged. You sit again in the quiet room. The drawer, unmoved, continues to rest in its place, not open, not closed, simply there. But today, your attention is drawn not to the inside of the drawer, nor to its surface or surroundings, but to the narrow, overlooked space beneath it, the gap between the bottom of the drawer and the floorboards. At first glance, it appears empty, a shadowed space, perhaps no more than 3 centimeters high, stretching the length of the wooden frame. You lower your gaze to meet it directly. The light filtering in from the window does not quite reach beneath the drawer, leaving the space in partial dimness. But as your eyes adjust, the details slowly emerge. The floor here is darker, not from any stain, but from absence of light, of motion, of change. A fine ridge of dust runs along the point where the drawer's bottom edge nearly meets the floor. The dust is gathered in uneven lines, moved gently by the occasional draft, or perhaps by the vibrations of footsteps long ago. You see a small object there, not large, not obvious, a tiny flake of something metallic, not shiny but dulled by time. It could be the corner of a staple, or a broken piece of a paperclip, or perhaps just a bit of solder, a forgotten fragment from a life no longer present. It rests there with quiet dignity, offering no clues about its origin. Near it lies a strand of hair, curled loosely, nearly colorless in the filtered light. It crosses the floorboard in a soft arc, unmoved for what feels like decades. There is also something else, a mark on the floor, faint but visible. A line, shallow and inconsistent, that curves slightly before fading. Perhaps from a shoe, or a piece of furniture once pushed across the floor. The line tells no story, yet it anchors the space in reality. Above it all, the drawer floats quietly, its weight supported by 4 narrow wooden legs. Each leg is slightly different. One has a tiny chip at its base. Another leans ever so slightly inward, a reminder that nothing stays perfectly aligned forever. A spider's web, nearly invisible, connects 2 of the legs. The thread is so fine that it only appears when the light catches it from a specific angle. A silver thread drawn across stillness. You resist the urge to blow it away. To disturb it would be to break the spell. The space beneath the drawer is not dramatic. It holds no secrets. And yet, as you observe it, you realize that it too is part of the room's quiet language. A language written not in words, but in dust, in grain, in silence. You sit with it. You breathe. And beneath the drawer, where the light does not quite reach, the world continues. Gently, slowly, without sound. Today, your eyes drift upward, not toward the drawer or the wall or the floor, but toward the ceiling, the final surface in the quiet geometry of the room. It is flat, pale, and still, stretching gently from corner to corner, untouched by anything but light and time. At first glance, there is nothing to see. But as your gaze softens, details begin to emerge. The paint is uneven in tone. Some areas are slightly darker, not from dirt, but from age. In one spot, near the corner above the drawer, a tiny bubble has formed beneath the paint, not large, no more than the size of a fingernail. It rises gently, holding its shape with quiet tension, as though suspended in a moment that never ends. Beside it, a faint line runs from one beam to another, perhaps the suggestion of a joint in the wood above. The line isn't straight. It meanders slightly, like a pencil dragged across textured paper. You notice a small discoloration near the center of the ceiling. Not a stain, just a shadow. Soft, diffuse, shaped like a shallow bowl turned upside down. You wonder if there was once a light fixture there, or perhaps nothing at all. Near the edge, where the ceiling meets the wall, the paint has cracked into delicate threads, thin as veins on a leaf. Each crack curves differently. Some arc inward, some drift apart. Together, they form a quiet pattern, like the lines in an old map. You trace them with your eyes, slowly, allowing your breath to follow the motion. There is a small insect husk resting in one corner. It is empty, dry, and utterly still. Its legs curl inward, and the body is pressed flat against the surface, as if it lay down for a moment and never left. You do not feel the need to remove it. It belongs here now. In the silence of the ceiling, nothing feels urgent. Everything waits. Everything listens. You notice how the light bounces upward from the floor, faintly illuminating the uneven surface of the plaster. It gives the ceiling depth, not dramatic but soft. A kind of quiet sky without stars. No one looks at ceilings for long. They are above us, steady, unnoticed. And yet, they hold so much of the room's breath. You remain still. The drawer below you is silent. The dust rests, and the ceiling, pale and cracked, stretches above it all, unchanging, unhurried and whole. You return once again to the drawer, this time not to observe its contents or its shadows, but something even more subtle, the wood itself, the material from which it was built, ordinary to some. But here it holds your full attention. You begin at the side panel. The grain runs horizontally, with a gentle, uneven rhythm, not perfectly straight, not artificially smooth. Each line is a memory, a moment in the life of a tree that once stood, tall and unnoticed, in a forest now long gone. The lines in the grain flow like water frozen in motion. Some bend upward, others dip. A few seem to curl in upon themselves, forming tight, circular patterns no wider than a coin. These knots, darker than the surrounding wood, feel dense, not to the touch but to the eye. They hold weight. You follow one of the lines with your gaze. It begins near the base and slowly rises toward the top, only to vanish beneath the drawer's edge. Your eyes pause at the surface's texture. It is smooth in most areas, but there are interruptions. Tiny indentations, a shallow nick barely visible, a worn patch where the finish has faded into dullness. These imperfections do not mar the draw, they define it. They tell you where hands once rested, where fingers once pressed. On the front face, near the corner, there's a faint ridge. Not a scratch, more of a raised ripple in the grain. Perhaps a flaw in the wood itself. Or perhaps something pressed there long ago, and time allowed it to stay. The bottom edge has a slight bevel, soft, curved as if shaped not by tools, but by quiet years of gravity. The finish is matte now, but if you tilt your head slightly, you can still see a subtle sheen in certain areas. It catches the light just enough to hint at polish once applied, once admired. The handle, a simple curved brass piece, shows signs of age. The metal has darkened, and where fingers most likely gripped it, the shine has returned in a small arc of use. Around the screws that fasten it, faint rings have formed in the wood. They are the draw's fingerprints, marks left by years of quiet repetition. You run your eyes across the top panel now. The grain runs in a different direction, vertical, slightly more compact. This surface feels more formal, more precise. But even here there are minute waves. Tiny dips, where the wood accepted time's quiet suggestion to soften. No part of the drawer is perfect. No surface is unmarked. And yet, in these patterns, these slow, layered memories pressed into wood, there is peace. You breathe slowly, letting your attention settle not on meaning but on presence. The drawer does not tell you anything, but it shows you everything. And that is enough for today. You return once again to the drawer. This time, not to observe its contents or its shadows, but something even more subtle, the wood itself, the material from which it was built, ordinary to some. But here, it holds your full attention. You begin at the side panel. The grain runs horizontally, with a gentle, uneven rhythm, not perfectly straight, not artificially smooth. Each line is a memory, a moment in the life of a tree that once stood, tall and unnoticed, in a forest now long gone. The lines in the grain flow like water frozen in motion. Some bend upward, others dip. A few seem to curl in upon themselves, forming tight, circular patterns no wider than a coin. These knots, darker than the surrounding wood, feel dense, not to the touch but to the eye. They hold weight. You follow one of the lines with your gaze. It begins near the base and slowly rises toward the top, only to vanish beneath the drawer's edge. Your eyes pause at the surface's texture. It is smooth in most areas, but there are interruptions. Tiny indentations, a shallow nick barely visible, a worn patch where the finish has faded into dullness. These imperfections do not mar the drawer, they define it. They tell you where hands once rested, where fingers once pressed. On the front face, near the corner, there's a faint ridge. Not a scratch, more of a raised ripple in the grain. Perhaps a flaw in the wood itself. Or perhaps something pressed there long ago, and time allowed it to stay. The bottom edge has a slight bevel, soft, curved as if shaped not by tools, but by quiet years of gravity. The finish is matte now, but if you tilt your head slightly, you can still see a subtle sheen in certain areas. It catches the light just enough to hint at polish once applied, once admired. The handle, a simple curved brass piece, shows signs of age. The metal has darkened, and where fingers most likely gripped it, the shine has returned in a small arc of use. Around the screws that fasten it, faint rings have formed in the wood. They are the drawer's fingerprints, marks left by years of quiet repetition. You run your eyes across the top panel now. The grain runs in a different direction, vertical, slightly more compact. This surface feels more formal, more precise. But even here there are minute waves, tiny dips, where the wood accepted time's quiet suggestion to soften. No part of the drawer is perfect. No surface is unmarked. And yet, in these patterns, these slow, layered memories pressed into wood, there is peace. You breathe slowly, letting your attention settle not on meaning but on presence. The drawer does not tell you anything, but it shows you everything. And that is enough for today. The drawer remains closed. It has not opened in this story. It may never open. and in its closedness there is something worth noticing. You sit quietly before it, as always, but now you are aware of the weight it holds, not just physical weight, but the weight of being closed, of not revealing, of remaining still. The objects inside, if there are any, do not press against the wood. They rest. The air within is undisturbed, completely enclosed, protected, and you realize that there is something soothing about things that are closed. A closed door, a closed book, a closed drawer. Their silence offers a pause, not an absence, but a quiet fullness. The drawer has likely remained in this state for years. The handle has not moved. The wood has held. The edges are sealed not with locks, but with stillness. You observe the line where the drawer face meets the frame. It is straight, but not perfectly so. At the right corner, the gap is slightly thinner, a natural result of wood expanding and shrinking through seasons. At the left, a faint shadow enters the seam, suggesting a slope too gentle to measure. The silence between what is outside and what is inside is where the mystery lives, not in content but in potential. You wonder but do not investigate. To leave it closed is to allow it peace. The weight is not heavy. It is settled, a kind of downward agreement between drawer and gravity. The floor holds it. The structure supports it. The air around it respects it. You imagine what it would sound like if opened. A low creak, a dry glide, a soft bump at the end of its rail. But none of these sounds exist today. Instead, there is only the imagined pressure of what is not happening. The power of rest. The drawer, like a closed eye, waits without tension. It is not resisting. It is simply not moving. And you, watching it, feel your own thoughts slow. The moment does not demand anything from you. You are not meant to solve. You are only meant to sit, to breathe, to be with something that does nothing. A closed drawer, a small silence, a still point in the turning world. The room holds air. That seems obvious. But today you notice it. Not the breeze, for there is none. Not the movement, for it is still.
Just air.
The air has remained here in this room for longer than you can say. It has settled into the corners, curled into the curves of furniture, folded itself into the folds of curtains. Not stagnant exactly, just unhurried. When you breathe in, the air is neither fresh nor stale. It is simply present. The drawer does not disturb it, nor does the light. The air holds tiny particles, not always visible, but always there. A fleck of dust, a scent of old pages, a faint, forgotten whiff of polish used long ago. If you sit very still, you can almost feel the air resting against your skin, not moving, just existing. Near the window, the sunlight makes the air shimmer faintly like warm glass. Tiny shifts of temperature rise gently along the wall. You watch without judgment. The air here is not in a hurry. It is not tasked with cooling or carrying anything. It does not rush to fill space. It has nowhere else to be. You realize that the drawer has never stirred this air, not even once in this memory. There has been no rush of movement, no sudden shift. The air beneath it is quiet, settled. It surrounds the drawer like a soft blanket, invisible but constant. You think about the air behind the drawer, the air in the gap beneath it, the air between the handle and the wood, and deeper, the air that may be trapped inside, unmoved for years. What happens to air that stays? Does it age? Does it forget the wind? Or does it become something else? Still, but full of quiet attention. The room doesn't answer. It only continues to hold it. The drawer, closed as ever, remains surrounded by this invisible presence. The air does not carry noise. There are no voices, no hum of machines, no distant cars, only the softest echo of breath, your breath rising, falling, rising again. The still air is not heavy. It is not light. It is simply what is. You do not disturb it. It does not disturb you. And in that agreement you share something sacred. The air remains. The drawer waits, and everything else fades. The floor is beneath you, as it has always been. But today you notice it not as a surface, but as a presence. The floor in this room is made of wood, aged wood, quiet wood. It does not shine. It does not protest. It simply holds. Each board runs lengthwise across the room, a silent alignment that you hadn't considered before. The grain runs in gentle lines, occasionally interrupted by darker streaks, reminders of the tree's life before it became part of this room. The floor does not creak, though you imagine it once did, perhaps when someone walked across it with heavy boots, or when the drawer was installed, or when no one was watching. Along the seam of two boards there's a small indentation. It is not recent. It may have been made by the corner of a chair leg, or by a dropped object, something with weight but not violence. The indentation is smooth around the edges, as if time itself pressed a finger there and left it to rest. There's a spot, just one, where the varnish has worn away. Not in a streak, not in a patch, but in a gentle oval, like the heel of a foot once stood there, over and then never again. You trace it with your eyes. It does not tell you who stood there or why, but it holds the echo of their presence, like a whisper caught in wood. Beneath the drawer, the floor is darker. The shadow lies across it like a quiet memory. It does not move. It is not sharp. It is only there. The legs of the drawer rest on the floor with quiet confidence. Each one makes contact in its own way, one slightly tilted, one perfectly straight, one resting in that small chip you noticed before. The contact is not loud, but it is sure. The floor accepts the weight of the drawer without resistance, without question. It does not ask for relief. And in this patient bearing there is grace. You imagine what lies beneath the floor: joists, beams, a crawl space, perhaps the cool soil of the earth itself. But those things are not seen. What matters now is the surface, the place where the drawer meets the world, a still point, a moment pressed into wood and time. You do not walk across it. You do not disturb it. You simply remain, breathing, watching, and in the silence of the room, the floor echoes, not with sound, but with presence, a soft reminder that beneath everything something is always holding. The drawer has always existed in quiet, but now night has come, and the drawer exists in darkness, not absolute darkness. There is a window, and beyond it, the faint blue-gray of moonlight filters in, softened by the curtain's edge. The drawer is not lit, but it is not lost. Its outline remains, a shadow within shadows. The sharp corners you once observed during the day have softened. The wood no longer reflects. It absorbs. It holds the dark the same way it once held the light. The brass handle, once faintly shining, is now almost invisible, only a suggestion of shape, caught in the blur of low contrast. You listen. There is no ticking clock, no hum of a distant machine, only the sound of air, resting. The drawer does not sleep, but it does seem more still, if such a thing is possible. The moonlight shifts slowly across the floor, not quickly, not noticeably, but if you were to sit long enough, you would see it glide like breath. The dust motes in the air no longer glisten. They float invisibly now, undisturbed. You imagine the drawer in the deepest hour of the night, 3 a.m. perhaps, when the world has forgotten itself, when even the walls stop listening. And the drawer remains, not open, not closed, just present. If a breeze were to enter, it would not move the drawer. If a sound were made, the drawer would not respond. It is beyond interruption. You begin to wonder how long it has remained here, through how many nights. Was it built during daylight? Was it first opened under candlelight? Has it ever creaked in the dark? Or has it always simply been? The texture of the wood feels deeper now. Without light, your eyes imagine more. They reach into the black, filling in detail that your mind provides. A line here, a knot there, and still the drawer does not move. Even the corners of the room feel further away now. The night makes distances feel different, as if space itself was stretching gently, respectfully around the drawer. You feel your breath slow, not by force, but by invitation. The drawer does not demand attention. It simply receives it endlessly, patiently. And as the night continues outside, silent stars, unmoving clouds, the drawer remains as it always has. Still, quiet, watching nothing, holding nothing, being everything. Beneath the drawer, there is space. Not much. Just a narrow gap, a quiet emptiness between the base of the drawer and the wooden floor. You've never looked there before, not directly. But now, your gaze lowers slowly until your eyes meet that low, quiet place. The space is thin, maybe 2 inches, just enough for dust to gather, just enough for something to be forgotten. But it is empty, or at least it seems to be. The light does not reach there fully. It enters as a soft suggestion, more tone than shape, a shadow inside a shadow. There is no movement beneath the drawer, no insects, no airshift, just stillness. The floor beneath it appears darker, as though the years have shaded it differently. The dust there is thicker, untouched for longer. Some of it has settled into small ridges, soft hills formed by time and air. You notice a small thread near the far corner. Perhaps from a sock, perhaps from a memory. It has curled into itself, making a gentle spiral unmoving, the legs of the drawer pressed down firmly, not harshly, but with intention. You can see where they meet the floor, the subtle indentations, the dust gathered in their shadows. The space beneath the drawer is like a breath held for too long. It doesn't strain, but it waits. It has no need for attention. It has no light of its own, but it exists faithfully beneath everything else. You wonder what would happen if you placed something there, a folded paper, a coin, a small key. Would it be safe, forgotten, or would it simply join the silence? You breathe in. The air feels cooler at this level, more hidden. The space beneath the drawer is like a sentence, never finished, a quiet possibility, not waiting to be found, just being. And as your gaze lingers there, you realize something important. Even the smallest spaces carry meaning. Even the most overlooked corners hold time. The drawer does not notice this space. It rests above it. But you see it. And in seeing it, you let it be, as it is. As it has always been. Light comes and goes. It enters the room quietly. It leaves even quieter. At this hour, the drawer is bathed not in brightness, but in what remains after brightness fades, the kind of light that doesn't shine, it lingers, soft, diluted, almost memory. A dull amber glow rests along the drawer's edge, casting a long, tired shadow across the wooden floor. The handle reflects it faintly, not enough to gleam, just enough to exist. The surface of the drawer warms under the last breath of day. It does not react. It does not change, but the warmth is there. A thin layer of evening settles into the grain. You can almost feel it, the way light clings to the fibers, refusing to let go all at once. The dust becomes golden, each speck suspended in the fading glow, like stars in a slow-moving sky. The corners of the room deepen. The line between the drawer and its shadow begins to blur. You no longer know where the wood ends and the dusk begins. The light pulls back, slowly, respectfully, as if nodding to the drawer before retreating for the night. You wonder how many evenings this has happened. Thousands, maybe more. Always the same dance. The drawer waiting. The light arriving, the light departing. Never rushed, never interrupted. The drawer never follows the light. It doesn't need to. It remains, and in doing so, it receives all the light has to offer. Not by reaching, but by staying. You shift your gaze to the wall. The shadow of the drawer stretches longer now, thinner, fainter. Soon it will disappear, not vanish, just blend into the dark. And still the drawer does not move. It never chases the day. It never mourns the night. It simply exists in the in-between. And as the last light slips from the room, the drawer glows, not with presence, but with permission. Permission to rest, to wait, to become once again part of the dark. There is dust. Always. Even in the quietest places, the cleanest corners, the most untouched drawers. The dust finds its way. You notice it now. A fine film that rests across the top of the drawer, thin as memory, soft as breath. It gathers not from chaos, but from time. Slowly, invisibly, it settles. Each speck a story, a fragment of fabric, a grain of wood, a piece of a world in motion come to rest. On the drawer's back edge, the dust is thicker, undisturbed, layered like pages in a forgotten book. You resist the urge to brush it away. To do so would interrupt the record. The drawer is a keeper of dust, a silent archivist of slowness. On the underside of the brass handle, a small curl of dust rests like a question mark. The type of detail one never sees unless searching. It does not cling tightly. It simply lays there, as if waiting to be acknowledged. In the seam between the drawer and the body of the furniture, the dust is finer, darker, compressed by time, shaped by stillness. You imagine each particle's journey, floating quietly in the air, drifting past light, past walls, past breath, until finally they land and stay. The dust does not complain. It does not try to be seen, but it is there, always. And in this quiet accumulation, the drawer becomes not just an object, but a place, a resting space for things that no longer move. The room itself accepts the dust, the corners, the ledges, the wooden edges where sun no longer reaches. All of it cradles dust. You inhale, not deeply, just enough. You wonder how much of what you breathe once settled here, years ago, and how much of you will become part of this place when you leave. The dust does not answer. It has no voice, only presence. And presence tonight is enough. The drawer rests. The dust remains. And you, somewhere in between, begin to fade. There is a shape to waiting, not a sharp outline, nor a clear boundary, but a form, soft, patient, round at the edges. The drawer has waited for a long time. Not for something specific, not for someone to open it, but for nothing in particular. A passive, quiet waiting, the kind that settles into wood grain and dust. You can almost see it. The way the drawer leans slightly into its frame, not from weight, but from years of simply being. The way its edges have smoothed, not from use, but from time. There's a soft compression in the corners of the wood, places where the air has pressed gently, year after year. The waiting is not heavy, it's not anxious, it's not bored. It simply is. The kind of waiting that fills a room, that curls beneath furniture, that stretches across walls. The drawer does not know what it waits for, but it does so with purpose, or perhaps with peace. You observe the tiny space where the drawer meets the air, a narrow line of shadow, a soft hush between object and space. That line, that seam, is where the waiting lives, not just in the drawer, but in the room, in you. You too are waiting, for rest, for stillness, for the end of noise. And the drawer teaches you how. It does not push, it does not pull, it simply remains, a quiet figure of patience. You begin to feel that waiting is not emptiness, but presence, a readiness without demand, a state of gentle alertness without strain. The drawer waits, you wait, the room listens, and all of it together holds the shape of waiting. Soft, still, eternal. The corners of the room have their own stories, not loud stories, but soft whispering ones. You watch the corners where the walls meet the floor, where the shadows gather. Dust settles quietly there, thicker than elsewhere. The air is still, almost reverent. Small cracks appear in the paint, tiny fissures that tell of years gone by. The corners are patient, holding their place without complaint. The drawer's shadow stretches into these quiet spaces, touching them lightly. You wonder if the corners feel the weight of the drawer's presence. But they remain silent, unchanging, waiting. There is comfort in this stillness, in these quiet corners. They hold the room together, just as the drawer holds its place. You breathe slowly and feel yourself merging with the quiet. The room and you both waiting without urgency. And in this shared patience, sleep feels nearer. The edges of things hold quiet stories. Not loud or hurried stories, but soft, slow tales, whispered by time itself. The drawer's edges are no exception. You trace them gently with your eyes, noticing the way years have softened the sharpness, rounding the corners in delicate curves. The wood no longer feels harsh or unyielding. It has grown familiar, welcoming even, like an old friend who has traveled through time without complaint. Layers of finish have faded, worn away slowly by the passage of days, leaving behind a muted palette of gentle browns and faded hues. The once bright gloss has dulled to a matte softness, reflecting light without glare, absorbing warmth without heat. Small cracks appear, but they do not threaten. Instead, they tell of endurance, resilience, a quiet survival through seasons that have long passed. You imagine the hands that might have once rested here, the fingers that press softly along these edges, perhaps absent-mindedly, perhaps with care. But such thoughts drift like leaves on a slow river, never urgent, never demanding. The edges do not call for notice. They do not shout for attention. They exist simply, faithfully, as the boundaries between the drawer and the world around it. There is a peacefulness in that boundary, an understanding that separation need not mean division or loss, but rather a gentle distinction, a soft embrace of difference. You breathe slowly, deeply, letting this idea settle inside you like a soft sigh. Around the edges, the faintest dust gathers, fine particles that have drifted down through years of still air, settling in quiet accumulation. This dust is not dirt. It is the residue of time itself, a silent witness to the slow march of moments. Tiny flecks catch the light now and then, sparkling faintly like distant stars, trapped on the edge of a quiet universe. The edges seem to hold all of this delicately, balancing between presence and absence, between touch and distance. You imagine what it would be like to touch these edges, not in haste or with force, but gently, reverently, as one might touch a fragile memory. And yet you do not move. You sit still, letting the soft edges hold you instead. In this moment, the world outside fades. There is only the quiet boundary between the drawer and the room, and between your breath and the air. Time flows slowly here, measured not by ticks or tocks, but by the gentle rounding of wood and the slow settling of dust. The edges teach you patience, an unhurried waiting without expectation. They remind you that some things do not need to be sharp or immediate to have meaning. Sometimes the softest lines are the strongest, and sometimes the quietest edges hold the deepest calm. You breathe out slowly, feeling the peace deepen, the world narrowing softly to this moment, to this place, to the soft edges that hold it all together. And in that slow breath you find rest. The surface of the drawer is calm, not glossy or shining, but steady and unassuming. Your eyes rest upon it like a soft cloud settling over the horizon. The wood is smooth to the touch, though years have left their subtle marks, tiny scratches and faint discolorations that speak of a life quietly endured. You imagine the countless moments passed with fingers, brushing across this surface, moments of thought, boredom, or gentle curiosity, yet none urgent, none rushed. The surface holds these traces like a diary written in silence. It doesn't boast of its history. It doesn't seek attention. It simply remains, holding space for whatever may come or may have already been. You notice the slight unevenness, where the grain of the wood rises and falls gently, a topography of time. Light falls softly upon these curves, highlighting them without harshness. In the corner, a tiny knot disrupts the uniformity, natural imperfection that makes the whole more real. The surface is not flat but alive with texture, inviting slow observation and quiet appreciation. There is no need to rush past these details. You slow your gaze, allowing each nuance to settle in your mind. The wood smells faintly, old dry, comforting, the scent of something that has witnessed much, but demands little. You imagine the surface in different lights and times, bathed in morning sun, warm and golden, cloaked in evening shadow, cool and mysterious, covered in dust after days of stillness or freshly wiped clean. All these states coexist quietly within the surface's being. There is a rhythm here, slow and steady, the pulse of days folding into nights, of moments blending seamlessly. The surface doesn't change rapidly, but it changes always, imperceptibly, gently. This slow evolution is a comfort rather than a frustration. You breathe in sync with this quiet steadiness. The drawer's surface teaches you to be patient, to notice the small things that don't scream for your attention, but still matter, to accept the passage of time without fear or resistance. Your mind slows, your body relaxes. The surface waits with you, calm and constant. And in this shared stillness you find a moment of peace. You do not need to move or think. You simply are. And the drawer's quiet surface holds you gently, softly, as you drift closer to rest. The room grows stiller now, as if holding its breath. The drawer rests quietly, unchanged but ever present. You watch the gentle dance of shadows along its surface, moving slowly as light fades and returns. No sudden noises disturb this calm. No urgent movement breaks the peace. The drawer waits without expectation, without demand. It simply is. Your own breath matches the slow rhythm of the room's stillness. You feel time stretching, elongating into softness. The air is thick with calm, dense with quiet. You notice the smallest details, a speck of dust on the wood, the faint grain of the handle, the faintest scent of aged wood. They settle in your mind like gentle waves lapping at a quiet shore. The drawer is not just an object, but a symbol of rest, of waiting without worry, of presence without urgency. You feel your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts slow and soften. The drawer holds space for you to let go, to drift, to fall asleep. The last quiet moment stretches infinitely, and in this timeless pause you find peace. The drawer and the room, you and the night, all merge into silence, and all is well.